Hey lovers, Valentine's Day is right around the corner. Are you still looking for that perfect gift for that special someone? Well, look no further. I write and record personalized custom songs, and I'd love to write one for you. The process is fun, as we work together, from picking what style of song you'd like and lyrical content to best convey your personalized message. Space is limited. Email ChrisDeMakes@gmail.com for more info on this one-of-a-kind gift that lasts a lifetime. That's ChrisDeMakes@gmail.com. Space is limited, so inquire now.
You've got a great idea for a small business, but you just can't get it off the ground. You want to be your own boss, set your own hours. Well, new year means new opportunities, and Shopify's got you covered to help get your venture off the ground. Shopify makes it easy to manage your growing business. You can get your store up and running easily with thousands of customizable templates. And they help with the details like shipping, taxes, and payments from one single dashboard. Don't kick yourself next holiday season when your 2025 resolution list looks the same as it does today. Make it happen with Shopify. Established in 2025 has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to start selling with Shopify today. Shopify.com/income.
It was a young and English summer. A song that changed my mind. I heard it on the radio.
Hey everyone, today's guest is Nick Diener, guitarist and lead vocalist for Flint, Michigan melodic punk rockers, The Swellers. Nick and I break down the writing, recording, and inspiration behind the fan favorite song, The Best I've Ever Had, taken from their 2011 full-length album, Good For Me. Man, this was a fun one. Nick's been a dear friend forever, and I learned so many things today. Namely, the fact that this song was inspired by Meat Loaf and Lynyrd Skynyrd. Huh? You ask? Well, that's right, and hearing Nick talk about those parallels is awesome. Bill Stevenson produced the record, and the stories were amazing as usual. Nick telling me that him and Bill bonded over their love of harmonies, song structure, and slide guitar. Slide guitar? For a punk rock song? Well, yes, and without it, this song just wouldn't be the same. I mentioned to Nick that I had no idea how these lyrics all told a complete story, until he divulged the Meat Loaf connection. And then it all made sense. So for all this, and the advice I gave to Nick when he was just an 18-year-old kid, stick around.
Hey, hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a podcast. Hey, hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a podcast. Hey, hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a podcast. Hey, hey, have you heard? Chris DeMakes a podcast.
Good morning, Nick.
Good morning, Chris. How's it going?
It's going well. How are you?
I'm feeling good. I'm excited to be talking to you and taking a break from, the daily routine.
Taking a break from basement dwelling. That's what Nick does these days.
Yep. I got my studio down here. I got my pedal building shop. Then the live room for my studio has kind of doubled into like a pedal parts storage facility. And yeah, I'm basically moving down here. Got like a little kitchenette and a bathroom. I don't really ever need to leave. So
yeah,
it's great.
Your kids are like, who's the guy in the basement?
Yeah, my kids are so new to the basement. We finally finished it. And so they come down here and they're just like, what is this place? This has been the second half of our house for 5 years, but it's kind of been the place where there's the darkness and the spiders. But, now it's the place to come and play with all of daddy's pedals and guitars and interrupt me watching movies. So it's great.
I love it. Well, I'm no stranger to a shameless plug, so let's go for it. Nick is the owner of Wonder Pedals, and Nick recently did a Chris DeMakes signature guitar pedal. All my best friends are pedal heads, and we're on like the fourth design, I think?
Yeah. I think we originally planned on making 100 of them, and I kind of had a feeling that there was going to be a lot of interest in a ska punk guitar pedal. So I kind of had, my sights set kind of high secretly. And then, we've just been pumping them out, and I got another run ready to go right now.
That's right.
Even dealers are reaching out to me being like, hey, we want some of those Less Than Jake pedals in here. And, what could have been a gimmick pedal turned out to be a really useful, good sounding pedal. So good work, Chris. You made a a good band that has some cool guitar tones and people want to be just like you.
Well, I could put that right back at you. Thank you for making a pedal that sounds great, because you put a lot of time into that, and I've never done a pedal before. Mostly for the reason that, if I'm not going to know someone as well as I know you, it's kind of a little bit scary to trust somebody. I knew it would be great. And talking about knowing you, I've known you, I feel like, forever. You and your brother, Jonathan, started the Swellers. You guys formed in Flint, Michigan in 2002.
Yes.
And then it was, just a couple years later, you guys released My Everest. That's when I remember hearing about you. And Feel by Ramen picked you up for your debut album with them called Ups and Downsizing in September 2009. And your next record, Good For Me, came out in June 2011. The track The Best I Ever Had is the one we're going to be talking about today. And the album was recorded at the Blasting Room, produced by Bill Stevenson and Jason Livermore. And I guess I forgot about that. I remember that now. What was that like working with those guys? Because we just got done working with Bill and it was amazing.
Oh, yeah. It was absolutely incredible. Yeah. What's kind of crazy is, the friendship with you and I, goes back to when I was 18 years old and I was filling in for a Wilhelm scream. And then soon after that, Roger gave me a hug on stage on the last show and said, let's do this again sometime. And I said, well, I'm not in a Wilhelm scream, sorry. And he goes, no, with the Swellers, like, let's do a tour sometime. And I was like, what? Okay. And then, yes, honestly, less than a year later, we were doing shows with Less Than Jake. And I think by the time we were on Fueled by Ramen, we kind of just crossed paths a few times after that. Like, you guys did a bunch of touring and then we did a bunch of touring, but we didn't really cross paths for maybe 4 or 5 years. So yeah, that 2011 timeframe when we were at the Blasting Room, it's not that like we lost touch, but we were just kind of doing our own things. And yeah, the Fueled by Ramen thing in 2009, made that record. And that was pretty much not self-recorded, but we did it with no budget. We paid for it ourselves. We recorded with our buddy Mark Mahalik and Johnny Minardi, the head of A&R.
Yeah.
He was interested in our band, and they didn't like drag it along slowly, but I kind of just was like, hey, we got to make a record. We're going to go make a record in Chicago, where he lived at the time. And we're like, if you want to come to the studio, come on by. But dude, we're making a record, whether you want it or not. And he was just like, oh, okay. And that kind of made the process kick into high gear, signing to the label. And yeah, they used that record that, we paid for ourselves. The budget was probably $3 or $4 grand, not much. And, for that to be on a big label like Fueled by was kind of cool. And then, yeah, for the next record, we were looking for our ideal producer, mixer team. And we had a few people in mind. And the way we got hooked up with Bill was we did a tour with Only Crime in 2007.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So that's, Russ from Good Riddance, Aaron from Bane, dudes from, Modern Life is War, and then Bill on drums. And it was Wilhelm Scream, Only Crime, and the Swellers. And I mean, some of those shows were like 13 people paid, so to see a punk legend like Bill get up on stage, set up his kit, play like there was 1,000 people there, and then load off stage. And we learned so much from Bill on that tour, kind of like the punk rock ethos. We were, and when you look up to someone, you remember everything they say to you. And
gosh.
Yeah. So to this day, I'm just like, oh yeah. So when there's a fight, we're not going to stop our set. We're just going to let it happen, because that's what Black Flag would have done. And if when you're done, get right off stage and load into your van as soon as you can. Like, don't stop and talk to anybody, and help the other band load off stage as fast as they can. Not because you're nice, but because you need to get on. You traveled a long way to be there. Like, you need to get on stage and play. So get their crap off the stage.
Exactly.
So there's all this stuff. And it was a great tour. And then after that, I kind of texted Bill. I mean, the Swellers toured a lot.
Oh, yeah. You guys put in some road miles for sure.
Yeah. And Bill even told me at one point that we toured more than Black Flag, and he was impressed by that. And I was like, whoa, I don't know if that's a good thing. Like, we're kind of losing our minds out here. But we just didn't know any different. We thought we had to stay on the road if we wanted to get anywhere. And I mean, that's kind of was the case in the late 2000s. You kind of had to tour for people to figure out who you were. So I'm texting Bill every time we came through Denver or Fort Collins, which honestly was like 4 times a year. Sometimes I would get a little text back. Sometimes I
You're like the house band.
Yeah, exactly. And I was, and for a while he just didn't really reply. And I'm like, whatever, I'm still just going to reach out, try to get people at our shows. And then one day I texted him, I think it was in mid 2010, late 2010, and he didn't text back. He called me back while I was driving the van to Colorado, and he sounded different and he was excited. And he basically told me the whole story about how he had a brain tumor.
Yeah.
That was removed and he's recovered and he's doing so much better, has this new lease on life. And he was like, we're buds, right? Like we toured together, like we were buds. And I was like, I mean, yeah, like, you know, like I'd like to think that that'd be cool. And he was just like, dude, you gotta come make a record with me. Like now, let's make a record. And you know how Bill gets, he gets super excited. And also it was kind of like it was like Bill version 2.0. Because, you know, the Bill, I think when we toured with him, he might have still had this tumor growing in his head. So yeah, he was just basically this new person. And we knew right then and there, we're like, we got to go to the blasting room. You know, Bill called me excited while I'm on the way to Colorado, and we talked for an hour. I'm like, this is so cool. So yeah, him being one of our favorite songwriters and producer, engineers, you know, you name it. We just knew that we had to go to the blasting room.
That's awesome. That is so exciting. So the best I ever had, do you remember writing it? Was it specifically for the Good For Me record? And where was it in terms of people's favorite song? Did Bill love it initially? Did Bill hear a demo of it? And did you have a demo of it? Lots of questions.
Yeah, we actually released the demo of it. I think it's on Spotify now and it's on Bandcamp.
And if everyone else heard this, it wouldn't be so sad. It was the best I ever had. It was the best I ever had.
We had the demo kind of as something we were going to send to, you know, Fueled by Ramen and be like, hey, this is what our new record's going to sound like. And it's one of those songs that I think I wrote in 15 minutes. Which is kind of wild because there's actually kind of a lot of lyrical content in it.
I was going to say there's a lot to unpack here. This song is just 1 second shy of 4 minutes. This is a big song.
Yeah, and for being kind of a punk rock song, and I mean, we could get into this later, but it was basically, I'll just say it, a Meat Loaf song. Verse 1, verse 2, verse 3, telling slightly different stories involving the same theme. And the demo, there really wasn't a chorus. It was like everything kind of broke down and there was like one line. And I think it said like, and if I could do it all again, blah, 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 something. And it kind of just like trailed off. And it was, I straight up ripped that off from Bad Outta Hell. I think the gates of heaven, I'll come crawling on back to you. And then there's this pause. And then, down.
The gates of heaven, I'll come crawling on back to you. I'm gonna hit the highway like a battering ram on a silver black Phantom.
That's what I did with Best I Ever Had. And then the verses I took from another Meat Loaf song. And of course, they don't really sound like Meat Loaf, but this is the idea of the structure.
So do you fancy yourself, real quick, the songwriter of those songs, Jim Steinman or Meat Loaf?
Unfortunately, both. In this situation, I had to write it and sing it. And also, I was so stupid to do this song half step down, but a capo on the second fret.
Mm-hmm.
And the only reason I did that was because I didn't want the song to be in the same key as all the other songs on the record. And that's something you care about at the time. And then years later, you go, why did I care about that? No one cares. So yeah, I'm up there. And, you know, I'm a baritone. You hear my voice right now. I'm not supposed to be up there. But it sounded cool on the record. So yeah, the verse 1, verse 2, verse 3 kind of the idea came from a song called Objects in the Rearview Mirror May Appear Closer Than They Are.
Yeah.
On Bad Outta Hell 2.
Great song.
And, you know, first verse was about, you know, him and his buddy when they were kids and he died. And then the second one was about like his abusive dad. And then the third verse was about like the woman who got away that showed him love. And, you know, as he said, the mystery and the muscle of love. Because of course, you know, it's Meat Loaf. So yeah, I was kind of just like, I want to do the song. The Best I Ever Had line was in my head. The verses kind of just came right out. And then, yeah, we had this non-chorus. But in pre-production with Bill, he said, okay, he basically, we went through it in pre-production with him, and he kind of left the room and looked back in. He goes, "Oh yeah, that's the best song on the record. It's the catchiest thing. You need to write a chorus though. Okay, bye." And he like went to go get coffee. And I was like, "What are you talking about? Like, it needs a chorus? No, this is like, it's art. It's theater. It's drama." And I sat there with a guitar and I kind of wrote what I was like, well, if it had to have a chorus and it had to say the best I ever had again, because that's the line. And I wrote that in about 2.5 minutes. And I showed it to the guys and they were like, yeah, it feels like that's what was supposed to be there this whole time.
Yeah.
And it makes it not a Meat Loaf song anymore.
Well, I never thought we'd be talking about Meat Loaf today. This is taking a really cool, unexpected turn.
Oh, get ready. We're going to be talking about Lynyrd Skynyrd soon too, man.
I love that. I want to get into this thing because, like I said, Nick, we got a lot to talk about. 3 minutes and 59 seconds, the best I ever had, and you can really hear those open strings talking about that capo here.
Yeah.
The first couple lines, it's just a lone guitar panned off slight right.
It was a young and English summer, a song that changed my mind. I heard it on the radio. And if everyone else heard this, it wouldn't be so sad. It was the best I ever had. It was the best I ever had.
It was a young and angry summer, a song that changed my mind. I heard it on the radio. And if everyone else heard this, it wouldn't be so sad. It was the best I ever had. It was the best I ever had.
I think it was just setting the tone for the song, kind of just being like, when I was young, I was listening to the radio and something came into my head and said, this is what I'm going to do. Whether I'm going to be playing guitar in a band or whether I'm just going to be a music lover. When you're 6-7 years old, you don't really know. So yeah, it was kind of just like how awesome that feeling was to just be sitting in front of your stereo or listening to the radio. You buy your first tape or you buy your first CD. And it was, just a different time, the nostalgia, just like burying your face in between two speakers and just taking it all in. So yeah, that kind of just set the tone for the song.
Okay. And you mentioned the demo. Do you recall, and you said you wrote this in like 15 minutes. Do you remember it pretty much being the same structure, arrangement, and lyrically? Or I know you didn't have a chorus quite yet.
Yeah, I think there was 1 or 2 lines that changed when we were in pre-production, or even I think it might have been when I was tracking vocals with Bill. And I just went, that line's goofy. It doesn't feel good coming out of my mouth. And basically on the fly, I was like, hey, how about this line instead? And, Bill was like, oh, yeah, that's way better. So, yeah, there was just a couple lines. So if you listen to the demo versus this one, there might be 1 or 2 lines, even words, I think. Yeah, it's been a long time, but it stayed relatively the same.
Okay, well, on the line, and if everyone else heard this, the drums come in. It's not a full-bore production, maybe played a little bit light and not super punchy. You can really hear the room there. On the last line, it was the best I ever had. Best I ever had is just vocals, followed by 16 bars of big stereo guitars, bass guitar, drums, now wide open, the drums, and a guitar lead panned off left. On the second half, another harmony guitar lead, panned slight right, joins the party. Sounds like there's like a flanger chorus on this, maybe played through like a Fender Mustang on the middle pickup. And is this the Skynyrd part you're talking about?
Yep, that's a slide guitar. So
is that a slide?
That's a slide. Ever since I grew up, or ever since I was young, Lynyrd Skynyrd was one of my favorite bands and still is. And Gary Rossington, the guitar player, he's the guy who plays slide on Freebird.
He's amazing.
Yeah. Rest in peace. Recently, he passed away last year. And I've just always kind of been like, I love slide guitar. And a couple years after getting into Skynyrd, No Use for a Name puts out the record More Betterness. And I think it's Chris Shiflett that's playing on that. But there are 2 or 3 songs that have slide parts on that record. And I was like, whoa, punk rock, like melodic punk rock with a slide guitar. That's not something that I thought, I would ever hear. So, 2 of my favorite bands, 2 of my favorite records, slide guitar parts. So when Best I Ever Had was kind of coming in my head, I had a melody for, that interlude for kind of the hook, in between the verses and choruses. And I just kind of knew that's got to be slide. And I never played slide live though, because I was afraid of, I like glass slides. I think I might have even used a Coricidin bottle, kind of like Dwayne Allman, because I tried to be cool like that.
Real quick for the listeners, a slide, what Nick is referring to is you maybe seen guitarists that'll put it's like a glass cap over their finger, essentially, and they will slide their finger up, and that glass sound, I've seen guys take a lipstick case and use that, a plastic one, doesn't work as well. You said a bottle, I've seen guys do that too. I've never been good at slide. I've picked it up, and I sound like I picked up an out-of-tune violin.
I'm terrible. I'm really honestly bad, and I would like to get better. You kind of have to, like Gary from Skynyrd used to put a couple of guitar strings underneath the 2nd fret to raise the strings up so you weren't clacking the slide against the frets as you went up and down.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so he almost made it kind of like and you know what, I don't remember if I did this or not, but another thing that Skynyrd did, he played like Freebird, for example, on the G string. Mm-hmm. And I think he would tune the B string, which is the next string high, down to the G as well. So he had 2 G strings. So when he plays with his slide, and he could angle that slide a little bit, and that is, I think, the flange chorus effect
that's
you're
what you're getting. Yes.
So I might have done that in the studio, again, trying to be like Skynyrd. But it also just sounds so cool. It's a great studio trick, tune 2 strings the same, play a slide, and it sounds like you're double tracking it. And then, the harmony came in on the second pass, the slide there.
And that's what I'm hearing. That's that flange that I'm hearing, having that same G note. That is awesome.
Yeah,
I wrote here, it's got this twangy Americana country feel, but it's melancholy. It's sad. This song doesn't strike me as sad. The lyrics, it's kind of like and then that part came in, I'm like, whoa, it's heavy.
Yeah. We had a song called Scoots on the My Everest record, and the solo at the end of that song was a slide part as well. And it's about a friend of ours that passed away, so it was kind of heavy. And
kind of lends itself to that, yeah.
And my parents heard that song, and they knew about Scoots and everything, our friend, and they told me that it sounded like my guitar was crying. Wow, sorry, dude. I've been a little emotional thinking about guitars, man. What the heck? Yeah, dude. So the slide guitar part, it makes your guitar sound like a voice, and it gives it this emotion. And putting that in Best I Ever Had, it kind of lended to the nostalgia. Yeah,
I can't recall the song. I had a guest on the other day, and they had a part like this. I said it sounds like the guitar's crying. And a lot of blues guys in Southern rock, Skynyrd, like you talk about Freebird. It sounds like someone's wailing, and you can feel that emotion come through the guitar player's fingers, Gary's fingers. It's great.
Yeah.
I remember April '94, September '96, and every day of '99. Whether I waited for those records or helped Seattle cry, it was the best I ever had, and I know it'll never die.
I remember April '94, September '96, and every day of '99, all of '99. Whether I waited for those records or helped Seattle cry, it was the best I ever had, and I know we'll never die.
Yeah, a lot to unpack there, right?
Yeah, what's happening?
Yeah, I think I was just kind of going back and figuring out formative moments for me, playing the music that I play and listening to the music that I love. And I mean, I got into Nirvana maybe a week before Kurt Cobain died. So being 7 years old and being like, I found my new favorite band. And then on MTV, it being like, your new favorite band is no longer a thing. And Kurt passed. So, being really young, it was like, what? Like it hit me hard, and it made me kind of dig into Nirvana even more, being like, well, if that's all there is, like I need to take it all in. So yeah, Nirvana was one of my favorites. And, I got started with music at a really early age. And so, my friend Ray, I lived in the suburbs of Chicago for a couple years, and his older brother belonged to like the CD of the month club at like Tower Records or, whatever it was. So he would bring over the CD every time he came to my house, whatever it was. And like one time it was Ace of Base, and we were like, I don't know, man, like it's fun, but I don't. And then he brought over, it might have been In Utero, the Nirvana record. And I was like, oh my goodness, like this is rock and roll. And then he brought over Bad Outta Hell 2, the Meat Loaf record. And to us, that was just the best one. Like we were just like, the songs are longer. He said, damn. And like, we have to turn down our stereo, like, because if my parents hear that, it's over. I don't think they would have cared.
I've always said, put huge guitars on a Meat Loaf record and it's symphonic metal.
Oh, absolutely. It's a play, it's a musical. Jim Steinman himself said every song he's ever written belongs to a musical that was never made called Neverland. And I was like, okay, that's weird. And I'm weird. So I dig that. But yeah, 6 years old, I went to a record store with my mom, and I had $12 saved up, and I got to buy my first CD ever with my own money. And I went up to the clerk and I was like, sir, I would like Meat Loaf, Bad Outta, and I didn't want to say hell in front of my mom. And then he looked at me like, what, little dude? Like, you want this? He got it for me, and I paid for it. And
because that record was about 15 years old then.
Well, that one had just come out.
Oh, sorry. That was Bad Outta Hell 2. Yeah, you're right. Okay.
Yeah, which is
that
funny.
Was,
not many people get started with Bat 2. But, I was.
Well, of course, I'll Do Anything for Love was the big hit on that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, okay.
And then actually it was years later that I got into the first Bat Outta Hell. But yeah, so that was kind of a formative thing there. And then, what did I say? September 96 or something like that. That might have been Pinkerton by Weezer, because that was a big one for me. Another slide guitar record. We got to give them credit for some slide.
And I'm thinking around 99, you had to hit your first Warped Tour, right? Maybe?
And I wasn't living on the right side of the state at that point, and I was a little bit too young, but 99 had so many records for me that I said every day of 99, because basically it was just, I couldn't pick just one. There was like the Get Up Kids, Something to Write Home About. I think there was a Jimmy Eat World record, a No Use for a Name record. Like, so many records came out in 99.
What's the line, whether I waited for those records or helped Seattle cry? Was that buying the records that the Seattle bands and crying with them in their disdain? Or yeah, that's kind of what I took from that.
Yeah, helping Seattle cry. Looking back, I'm like, it's a little corny, but I think that was referring to Kurt's death. So me being really young, and I didn't even know how to process death. I never knew anybody who died. I think Kurt Cobain was the first person I ever heard of that died young, which is kind of scary, or died at all. I didn't have any family members. So that's the first person on the news or on TV. So yeah, it kind of impacted me in a big way. And then, waiting for the records, it was just kind of cool. Like it was a different time. It was the 90s, like going to an actual record store. And
you actually had to go find your music instead of just pushing a button. Well, yes. Verse 1, we got the drums, bass, and stereo guitars now playing eighth note palm mutes, and the bass tone here is just ripping. Not surprising. Dude. There's just so much low end on it. And it's just, but it's still punchy. It's great.
Blasting Room, and I think Rise Against had recorded their 2 records before us, and they basically had the rig set up. And then Bill was just kind of
plug in here.
Yeah, he's like, you want to just do this one? And then we're just like, yeah. So Fender P bass, quarter pounder pickups.
Love it.
And then our bass player Anto just he tracked bass for several days. A lot of times the bass player will just go in. It's like, you just laid bass down in a day. We're good.
Not with Bill.
With Bill, you take your time. Every note's going to be in tune and sound great. And bass is really important. So
I don't know if you want to track bass with a drummer like Bill, because he wants it locked.
Oh my goodness. And you get it locked. Yeah.
You get it locked.
Poor bass player sitting there like, come on, please. Could I take a break?
On the line, and every day of 99, we get a call and response. All of 99. All of is just your voice, but 99, there's a big harmony on that. It's the first harmony of the song. On the line, Whether I Waited for Those Records, there's like a tension note that starts panned off left and on, or Helped Seattle Cry. Guitars that are panned left and right, and here's where I wrote, these guitars sound like they're crying to me.
Oh,
there's
cool.
guitars there, but there's also, is it mixed with voices?
I think if you're referring to like the all of 99,
It's right after Cry.
And then it goes like, there's like another, and I think it's a voice. I think it might be me be saying just like either like an or another like cry or something. And I'm also bending the guitar like a, like one of those. So it's distortion or fuzz with my voice kind of set in the background. And it's those things combined.
That's what I'm hearing there. On the last two lines, it was the best I ever had, and I know we'll never die. The stereo guitars open up here on these lines before we get into pre-chorus 1. Yeah, we were right about it. We'd be lost without it. Yeah, what could ever take that?
Yeah, just kind of getting that, getting you ready for that chorus. And
this may be my favorite part of the song.
Oh yeah, the guitars and the drums together, the kind of syncopation and just like the power behind it. And I don't remember if Bill suggested kind of the third pass that kind of has like the but I don't remember if Bill suggested that or if he just really liked it.
I've always said, man, a great pre-chorus can make or break a chorus.
Yeah.
Even if you have a mediocre chorus, you got to have a great setup and just, I love what's going on here. Great syncopation, rhythm between the drums, bass, and guitars. On the first line, yeah, we were right about it. Is there a super tucked harmony there?
Probably, yeah. That sounds
it
about
is,
right.
I mean, I had to listen to it like 10 times. I'm going, this doesn't sound unison. It sounds like a tucked harmony on that line. And on the next line, we'd be lost without it. You get this It's like this long vocal part with harmonies on it. And I have to ask, was that a Bill thing? That sounds like a Bill idea there. Not taking anything away from you or your songwriting, but that's like a Bill part.
Yeah, right. And that's one cool thing that I'll say thank you, because that was me and my idea. But I found that through this, Bill and I saw very eye to eye on a lot of this stuff, and we had a lot of the same devices and a lot of the same rules. Like there's no rules in punk rock, but there's kind of rules. There's there's some things that it's like, it just sounds better if you do this.
There's a bag of tricks we can pull from.
Yes, and a couple things, like, for example, this is the key of the chorus, so you want the pre-chorus to start on this chord instead of this chord. It makes it drop harder, even if there's no change musically. Sometimes you don't need a pause, but the pause plus a different note hitting will make it sound even bigger. And I actually called those ahs in this song the full house ahs, like that. And we do that a lot on this record.
Well, the reason I thought this is maybe a Bill thing, him and I talked a lot about harmony. He knows Roger and I can sing, and he was excited to work with us. He wanted to build some really cool harmonies with these tracks. And we were doing this backing pads of this one chorus, and he's talked to me about the Beach Boys, and we sat there. We must have talked for like a half hour. He's like, okay, you want to record? And I'm standing there in the vocal booth, and we're just talking about harmonies, exactly what you're discussing. And he's just so into those layers of vocals. But that's really cool that you wrote that. On the last line, what could ever take that? Ever take that is just vocals, but something cool happens before there, Nick. On the what could, the band goes, and the guitar left and the guitar's right, they're kind of sloppy there.
Yeah.
It's not a Pro Tools clip of a mute. And I love that. I love that you can hear that. This is a great recording. It sounds big. It sounds clean. It sounds pro, but it's not lined up to where it's so sterile it sucks the life out of it.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's and like when I said that Bill and I see eye to eye and have a lot of the same tricks, a lot of that's probably because I steal it from Bill and his bands, So I've obviously listened to the Descendants and All, and even Black Flag, for years and years. And like, I mean, listen to Stephen Edgerton, his slide offs and stops, sometimes they last 3 seconds. Like it'll just like the song ends and then he'll be like, and then sometimes when everybody stops really tight, you know, if it's like a stereo guitar, the sloppiness makes it sound better. You know, it just sounds so. And the cool thing is, naturally, as a guitar player, and Ryan, our guitar player, we just knew what we were going to do. Like mine might be a little bit more of a, sometimes we call them a dyno roar, that kind of just, you know, like when you kind of slide up and down real quick to stop something. So his might be a little tighter and mine might be a little looser. And that always sounded good on when we played live or on records. And that's something too that I made bands do that I recorded. You know, I've recorded a lot of bands' records, and sometimes they would have that sterile.
Yeah.
And I would be like, hey, let's let people know that you're people playing guitars. And what's funny is some guitar players can't be sloppy and loose with their stops. So I would actually punch in. I would punch in and do like a little stop myself and then play it back and be like, see, it's worse, but it's better, you know?
It has some feel to it all of a sudden.
It truly does.
Hey everybody, we got a lot more coming up with Nick Diener after a few words from our sponsors.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Bowie, Dylan, Marley. You've heard the names and maybe you've heard their songs, but what about the stories behind the records that made titans of music like these so universally loved and important? Join me, Josh Adam Myers, host of The 500, as each week I go through a different album from Rolling Stone magazine's 500 Greatest Albums list from 2012 with an incredible lineup of comedians, actors, and musicians talking about how the music has impacted their lives. New episodes of The 500 come out every Wednesday. Listen now wherever you get your podcasts.
Hello, everybody. I'm Bruce.
And I'm Nolan, and this is the Corner of Gray Street podcast. As longtime Dave Matthews Band fans, we set out to create a podcast to dive deep into the past, present, and future of DMB.
Not only do we recap and review shows within an ongoing tour, but we revisit past shows from throughout the band's history, conduct interviews with a wide variety of guests with ties to DMB, and create unique and exclusive content like our Concerts on the Corner series.
Whether you're a fan of the band or just a fan of great music, we think you'll find something you'll enjoy. We can't wait to see you on the Corner of Gray Street.
Hey there, Chris DeMakes a Podcast listeners. Ready to take your podcast experience to the next level? By signing up for the supporting cast at chrisdemakes.com, you not only ensure the continued production of our show, but also unlock exclusive perks. Subscribers receive a weekly bonus episode of our other podcast, The After Party, co-hosted by Chris Fafalius and myself. Many fans rave that The After Party is just as enjoyable as the main show. And with close to 200 music-centric episodes in the archive, there's a treasure trove of entertainment awaiting you. Thank you for tuning in and for your support in keeping the podcast going strong. Join us at chrisdemakes.com and let's keep the fun conversations going.
And now, back to the show.
We're going to hop into chorus 1.
Take that, I miss it too. And I miss the songs we knew. And if I could go back, I'd do it all again. It was the best I ever had.
I miss it too. And I miss the songs we knew. And if I could go back, I'd do it all again. It was the best I ever had.
Yep, and that's the chorus that I just whipped up, you know, because Bill said the song needs a chorus. This is the catchy song, which was cool, you know, because when we were talking to John Janik, the president of Fueled by Ramen, he was someone we didn't talk to very often. So when he called, we were like, okay, this is a big deal. And, we were a young band. We wanted to be on the radio. We wanted to be the biggest band ever. So we're going to listen to what he has to say. And when he listened to our demos, there's the next song that ended up being on Good For Me was called Better Things. And he was like, I think that's the one. I think that's the single. We're going to push that one, come up with like a little bit more catchiness in that song. And I think that'll be the one. So, and my brother and I joked around. He wrote most of that song. And we always said it sounded like an iPhone commercial or like something like that. It kind of had this, it was sort of like a Everclear pop sort of song.
I'm on my way to better things. It's not the first time, not the last time. I'm on my way to better things. I wish you well, I'll be just fine.
And we didn't love it, but it was fun. And because John Janik said, focus on that one, we were like, okay, we're going to really polish that song and make it good. And we are going to include it on the record. And in hindsight, I wish we didn't. I think we had some B-sides that were better because when we talked to John Janik later, after the record was recorded, he goes, oh yeah, Best I Ever Had should definitely be the first single. And we were like, wait, what? That's the song that we like the best. Like, that's going to be the single?
Yeah, usually doesn't happen. The song you like the best, the one you think is going to be a home run, like that's the one the label doesn't pick, right?
Yeah, and and also Bill told us too, that's another change. In the old demo, I think the first verse went to a fast punk rock drum beat, which Bill actually isn't that big of a fan of. For him being a punk rock guy, he doesn't care for that West Coast skate punk.
No.
And he was always like, why you gotta go to that beat? Like, why don't you just like play the drums? And we were like, but we're a punk band. Like, all the people in Europe will think we're slow if we don't do it. And he was like, do this verse just straight tempo. And we were like, fine, Bill.
Yeah, I heard Bill say a couple of times, oh no, the Fat Records beat.
Yep. He said that a million times with us. And and so we listened to him. We're like, we'll meet you halfway. We're going to come in so we did the last verse of this song. We went fast. And we were like, Bill, can we go fast on the last one? And he goes, yeah, because Rise Against made some radio songs where the DJ will listen to the first verse and chorus and the second verse and chorus and be like, this is a big radio song. And then they end with the punk rock that you remember from old Rise Against. They sneak it in there. And I was like, ooh, that's kind of cool. So we could sneak in some of our old flair in there too. And he's like, yeah, go for it. Who cares?
I don't know if you recall when the last time you actually listened to this track, we get the double time beat in verse 2.
Oh, okay. So yeah, you know what? I was thinking that the intro might have been verse 1. Yeah, you're right. So and I think Bill was pretty mad at us for putting it in verse 2 still. Like it was a little bit too soon.
While the world was waking up and putting on their suits, I was planning my escape. And when I had that conversation with my mom and dad, I said I'm never looking back. It was the best I ever had.
It's not super wide open hi-hat crazy. It's kind of, there's some restraint here.
You're right. And I think that was the compromise. I think when we were like, we want to go fast. And then Bill was like, bring it down. Like the song hasn't been brought down yet. Go fast, but bring it down. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. And I mean, the cool thing about like the kind of more quiet drums that sort of happen in the very intro and in verse 2, I mean, they're not quiet by any means, but you could tell the dynamics there. My brother might be hitting at like 60% velocity versus going ham. And the Blasting Room drums, tracked by Jason Livermore, you just can't get better than that. They sound so good.
Oh, it's like cannons going off in that room.
So even when he's playing like reserved like he is, it just and it almost sounds like it's loaded with fake samples, but
it's not.
No, like that's my brother and Jason basically. And it was so funny because Jason was acting. I don't know if he was acting. He was just unimpressed. He was just doing his job, and my brother would do something gnarly. And we'd all be like, oh my God, that was such a good fill. That sounded good. And then Jason would just be like, yeah, all right, cool. Let's go on to the next chorus here. And it was just funny because we were like, I don't know, we were not expecting pats on the back, but we were just like, oh yeah, that's right. Jason has worked with some of the best punk rock drummers in the world. This is just a day on the job for him. And we were just so impressed with how it sounded and like,
oh, sure. You're freaking out.
yeah. So yeah, that's the drums were another really cool part about working there.
Awesome. And here's the lyrics for verse 2. While the world was waking up and putting on their suits, I was planning my escape. And when I had that conversation with my mom and dad, I said I'm never looking back. It was the best I ever had. We get harmonies on the line, and when I had that conversation with my mom and dad, I said I'm never looking back. And on the last line, best I ever had, again, is just vocals. Stereo guitars are ringing over from chorus 1 in this verse, drums, bass, and for the first couple lines, there's only one guitar panned off right. And do you recall if that was the same stereo guitar configuration? Because this guitar sounds so thick and different. It's just that one guitar for the first half here, and then the guitar leads come in for the second half, panned off left and right.
Yeah, I want to say that guitar by itself in that verse might be Ryan, our other guitar player, who's more bar chord, ham-fisted.
Yes, perfect word, ham-fisted. It just sounds like this big, huge, low-end chord coming at you. I haven't heard that tone yet on the record till second verse, and that is really neat.
Yeah, and then, my style on the song is kind of more open chords. There's like those little janglies and flourishes that happen, because it's like I have like ADHD when it comes to guitar parts. Like my fingers have to be doing something. I don't want to noodle too much, but I have to throw in a couple of extra things just because it's, I have that compulsion. I'm just like, I got it. So like when you hear that little in the chorus, it's just something I felt like I had to do, and it worked. It was cool.
Something else I found interesting in here, Nick, was there's no call and response after I was planning my escape, like verse 1. There's a pause there, but I think that pause kind of has to be there because then the guitar leads come in.
Yeah.
And then you're like, whoa. So by not having that call and response, I think the guitars hit a little bit harder there. Was that discussed? Do you remember that was talked about?
I think it just, we didn't have any call and response there just because we were bringing it down a little bit. And you're right. It's kind of just like sometimes take stuff away so the next part is even bigger.
Yeah. That dual harmony that comes in there is now happening for the rest of verse 2, and that one guitar is still there that we talked about from the top. And the line here, and when I had that conversation with my mom and dad, I said, I'm never looking back. Was that you saying, hey, I want to go play music?
Yeah. And I mean, I think the lyrics might come off as me being like, F you, mom and dad, like, I'm out of here. But my parents were always very supportive. But I did tell them, we're going, and this is it for me, and it actually started with Less Than Jake, believe it or not, with Wilhelm Scream losing their bass player on a Less Than Jake tour right at the beginning.
Yes.
Wilhelm Scream comes to my house. I say, I'm going to fill in Detroit for you because I live here and I love your band. I know the songs. I'll even do the backup vocals. And, Trevor from Wilhelm was like, you got to go on the entire tour with us. Like, we're doing full US. We got 4 weeks. We need you to go with us. And, and I was like, I'm in college.
Weren't you like 18 then?
Yep, I was 18. It was January.
Oh my gosh.
And I had another semester before I was going to actually stop college and start touring full time with the Swellers. So I was kind of like, well, we're getting close. So I found out it was going to cost $2,000 to drop out. There was like this penalty. And I went to school. They told me that. And I called the band and I said, it's going to cost me $2,000. My parents aren't going to pay me $2,000. And I was going to, the University of Michigan, Flint. It was a smaller community college. Not that expensive, but my parents were footing the bill for it. So they weren't going to pay another $2,000 for me to leave. And then the band said, all right, come back. We're writing you a check for $2,000 if you're cool with that being the payment for you touring with us. And I was like, oh, what? So yeah, I talked to my parents and they were just like, well, you're going to quit school anyway, and you're a musician. Have fun. And of course they were probably terrified, but my last class ever in school informal education was rock and roll history.
Oh.
And I went to the guy and I said, hey man, you're not going to see me again. I'm touring in a rock and roll band across the country. And he was just like,
I'm about to make some rock and roll history.
Yeah, man. And I was just like, all right, cool. And and I'll never forget the first day that I was on that tour. And I think I've told you this before, and I don't want to, and you can cut this out if you want, but you were standing next to a curtain on a cell phone, and I walked by and you kind of moved the cell phone away and covered it and looked at me and you said, don't ever sign to a major label, kid. And then and then I walked by. So I don't know what was going on, but it was so funny. And I was just like, oh, yes, sir. Okay. And I was
probably screaming at our A&R guy or something about who knows what, but that's hilarious. That was our first interaction.
It was just such a cool moment, for me, because I hadn't really met you guys yet. And then I think that first show, and of course, feel free to cut all this out because it's rambling, but Rhino was your tech at the time. And I was on stage getting ready for, I think it was my second show with Wilhelm after Detroit. And something happened where my string just popped off my bass before the curtain went up. It was one of those venues like Cleveland House of Blues or something with a curtain.
Yeah.
And I looked over at Rhino, who was in Guitar Land on stage right. And I said, oh, my string came off, because I wasn't a bass player. And he went, bring it to me. And he kind of just like wrapped it back around, tuned it up, gave it back to me. I put the bass on, and then the curtain went up. And then it was time for Wilhelm's set. And I was just like, oh God. And it was such a shock, but it was like, man, this is my first taste of touring. It's getting intense already.
Yeah, man.
Yeah. So
18 years old, you got thrown in the fire. That's what you have to sometimes do. And it sounds like that's what your parents let you do. They clipped your wings. And sometimes when we make decisions and we're steadfast about those decisions, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
That in and of itself speaks volumes. I want to get into pre-chorus 2 now.
They were wrong about us. We showed them not to doubt us. No one could ever take that.
And they were wrong about us. We showed them not to doubt us. Yeah, what could ever take that? Again, on the first line, we get a subtle buried harmony. Same overall instrumentation as pre-chorus 1, but with different lyrics here in pre-chorus 2. After the second line, we showed them not to doubt us. We get that huge harmony backing vocal. On the last line, ever take that is by itself, but it is a higher melody there. You go up on that one, and we do get the same lyric there. And I think that lyric's important. Yeah, what could ever take that? You get that lyric again, and that's a big lyric, I think, in this song. What could ever take that? Are you saying what could ever take that away?
Yeah, it's just kind of like, this is ours. It's like, it's something that we have, whether it's the punk rock community or just like that resolve, that DIY ethic that got us started. And yeah, and also, growing up in Flint, Michigan, in the music scene there, was just absolutely incredible. I think we took it for granted and we were just like, oh, this is, there's an all ages scene. Sometimes there's 250 people at an all ages local show. That's cool. And then after touring, we realized that was incredibly rare. Like, places didn't necessarily have all ages venues, let alone ones where local bands would draw 250 people. And yeah, there was the band Chiodos, from the Flint area. There was us, a band called Oh My God from Chicago, and a band called The Hard Lessons from Detroit. And we would basically be on a cycle where it's like we would play one month, the next month Chiodos would play, Oh My God, and then The Hard Lessons. And the guy who ran the Flint Local 432, Joel Rash, he basically told us years later, he's like, you 4 bands kept that place open, just basically doing a show every now and then. Like, that's what paid the bills. And I was like, whoa, that's really cool. And we were just kids, just having fun playing for our friends. And we ended up doing really well locally. And yeah, I think Less Than Jake played next door to that place at the Metropolis in Flint.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. And
we also played the Machine Shop years ago.
Yep.
The old Machine Shop. Chorus 2 comes right off the heels of pre-chorus 2. And we got the same overall instrumentation, arrangement, and vocal placement as chorus 1. On the last line, the band comes out of chorus 2 into a halftime groove. And I'm calling this like 14 bars, Nick, of like a post-chorus or even a bridge, I guess you could call this part, or musical interlude.
And I miss the songs we knew. And if I could go back, I'd do it all again. It was the best I ever had. I'd do it all again.
You get these big ahs with You By Yourself saying, I do it all again. Another huge with harmonies. I do it all again. And then we get into verse 3. And here's where the song really gets interesting for me, because we kind of get a double verse here. This first time that we come out of this post-chorus bridge, it's the same instrumentation as the intro here for verse 3, except that guitar at the top, panned off left, is a bit louder and bigger here. May have been how you guys were playing it. Might be digging in a bit more there than the top of the song. But we're getting more information. That's why I say this part gets interesting. As you mentioned from the very top, there's a lot of lyrics here.
Yeah.
I've been everywhere now, searching far and wide, but she was down the street. She looked just like an angel, flying down to me, but I was underground, where the devil comes to feed.
I've been everywhere now, searching far and wide, but she was down the street. She looked just like an angel, flying down to me, but I was underground, where the devil comes to feed. And this set of lyrics here made me go, wait a second, because this is very different from what else is going on. What's happening here?
So this is Meat Loaf's third verse, where he finds that girl that showed him everything, and then she's gone, and it's just part of his history now. So when I was writing that verse, it was almost like, the first verse is kind of about me finding music and listening. The second part is about me deciding I wanted to go out and play music. This third verse is kind of like a punk rock love story that's a little bit fiction and a little bit fact. I've been everywhere now, searching far and wide, but she was down the street. It's about my wife. I was all over the country at that point, all over the world, honestly. Like, we went to Japan, Europe, Australia by then. I had the chance to meet all kinds of people. And the person that I fell in love with was 20 minutes down the road from me. So I was like, wow, that's a nice thing to put in the song. And then, I don't know, I think then the rest, it kind of takes this turn where it was like, she looked just like an angel flying down to me, but I was underground where the devil comes to feed. It's kind of just going with that bat out of hell imagery, and it just makes it sound like I'm this bad boy on tour and she's the good girl back home. And this is where it's not really about my wife anymore. It's a fictional thing.
Okay. Well, I got a couple questions. So halfway through here, on the line, she looked just like an angel. The drums come back in until the end of verse 3, much like the top of the song. On the last line, where the devil comes to feed, vocals only for devil comes to feed. And, right there, you could have dropped in to the third and final chorus of the song. Okay. Instead, you opted to go for another verse. Now, this would have been the time to maybe go back to the intro lyrics and have them come back in, but you wrote another verse here.
Yeah.
Did Bill ever say to you, man, where are we going here? There's a lot, because the whole back half of this song is really taking a turn now, talking about your love interest and, kind of getting some dark imagery here with devil comes to feed. So was that ever discussed, or did Bill just love the whole thing where it was going?
Yeah, I think it was one of those things where Bill and me and the band, we were just kind of waiting for more story, so, and that's like when I was writing it, I wrote that bit of that verse, and then it could have gone into the next pre-chorus or chorus, But I was like, oh, no, I got more to say. I got to wrap that bit up.
This makes so much more sense to me now.
Yeah.
These lyrics, when you talk about Meat Loaf, Jim Steinman, I mean, think about some of the songs he created. Total Eclipse of the Heart.
Oh, yes.
That tells 1 5.5-minute story.
Uh-huh.
It's incredible. And that's kind of what you set out to do here. So if that was the inspiration and what you were going for, I think you kind of knocked it out of the park, because I was sitting here wondering, my gosh, this is a big song for whatever you guys wanted to call you guys at the time. Melodic punk rock, pop punk. This is a long song.
Yeah, it really was. And I think at one point it was going to be longer, but we kind of were like, okay, let's rein it in a little bit. But yeah, at that point, we kind of just wanted to throw out the rule book. And I was like, at this point, it's catchy enough and I feel engaged by it. So that was another rule of mine, was you can throw out the rule if you just want to hear more, if it feels right.
Well, I don't know if this is the second half of verse 3, or we're just going to call it verse 4 here.
Sure.
The drums go full double time again, punk rock here. Fat Records has struck again.
Oh, yes.
Got that punk rock beat along with the bass and stereo guitars. The guitar panned off left is morphing into like this octave part. I really like that. And again, we get new lyrics and new info here.
Comes to feet, and everything felt so right. I could show it to do wrong, but she taught me everything. And I don't know where she is now, but I'll never forget. She was the best I ever had, or ever will again.
And everything felt so right. I could show it to do wrong, but she taught me everything. And I don't know where she is now, but I'll never forget. She was the best I ever had, or ever will again.
Yeah, so one word there that is different is I could show her to do wrong.
Ah, okay. I could show her to do wrong.
Yeah, and that's funny because online, if whether you go to AZ Lyrics or P Lyrics or whatever, I used to do that for my own band. And I'm not sure if you've done that on tour as well, but if you're going to play a song where you need a refresher,
Of course.
I would go online and I would find that a bunch of words weren't right. And they're very close, like one syllable off or something.
Yeah.
Like in the beginning of the song, for example, it's like a song had changed my mind. That's what I wrote. Everybody and their mothers say a song that changed my mind. And it got to the point where that sounded better to me. So I was like, oh, maybe everybody, and there's a couple songs I have where the lyrics were misheard, but the misheard lyrics were, honestly, I was like, I should have done that.
Do you know how funny that is? I can't count now how many guests, at least a half a dozen or more, that have said, I went online and the fans, or, they would keep telling me they thought it was this lyric. And finally I was like, man, that should have been the lyric.
Yeah. It's sometimes what rolls out, even if it's like subconsciously, if someone's listening to a song and that's what they hear, that's what they want to hear, maybe that tells the story better, because I kind of used to get stuck in my own head and be like, well, this is the melody, I just have to find words that fit. Lyrics always came second to me and melody always came first. But for this song, it was kind of one of the first times I was like, I need to get some actual lyrical content in here. What was it? Everything felt so right. I could show her to do wrong, but she taught me everything. I think that was kind of the line where it was like, I think I'm going to be the bad boy, but she actually taught me more than I bargained for. And then it was over. And I don't know where she is now, but I'll never forget. Like, she was the best I ever had, or, whatever. Like,
yeah.
And basically it's almost like the one that got away. It's like the classic punk rock, the one that got away story with a little bit of weird angel devil imagery. And then, yeah, like you said, with those octaves though, I don't want it to get too Meat Loaf. So I needed to get back to No Use for a Name. So, so Chris Shiflett, strikes again, which also, that's a really cool thing. Before the internet put news in your face every 5 seconds, was I'm sitting there as a kid listening to No Use for a Name, that record More Betterness, taking it in, loving it. And then, I don't know, a week later, I go see the Foo Fighters. Chris Shiflett's on stage playing with the Foo Fighters.
Yeah.
I don't know that though. I don't know who Chris is. I don't know that he was in No Use for a Name. And then years later, looking up Wikipedia or whatever. I'm just like, wait a second. So like the guy on this record that I loved was also the guy on this record, but they came from such different worlds.
Yeah.
So yeah, Chris Shiflett's like he's up there for me as far as inspiration, and just like he's had his hands in a lot of buckets.
He's Chris DeMakes a Podcast alumni. He's been on the show.
Yeah, man. And I love listening to your show. I just listened to Chris Ballou, from the Presidency of the United States of America. And I actually sent him a guitar pedal yesterday. So
yes, we talked about that not too long ago. You asked me for his email address.
Yeah. So thank you for that. It's kind of cool. Yeah. Being able to connect with people through the show.
Well, verse 4, we get a couple harmonies, and I don't know where she is now, and but I'll never forget. And then after or ever will again, the guitar lead hook left and right comes back, and the drums go back to that big rock beat with an open hi-hat for a total of 16 bars. Halfway through, we get a lone vocal from you saying the best I ever had. And then we get into an outro. And all this outro part it's really interesting. It's just the band hanging over, ringing out. The big stereo guitars, the cymbals are decaying, the bass is decaying. And you come in, it's just vocals alone. And this is a really personal part. And I feel like a lot of Meat Loaf songs do this, where it'll drop at the end and it's just a piano and a voice. In this instance, it's just a voice.
And if everyone else heard this, it wouldn't be so sad. It was the best I ever had.
And if everyone else heard this, they wouldn't be so sad. It was the best I ever had.
Yeah. And what's funny is I've never really actively thought about that until now. But yeah, there's no final chorus. We get out of that big long verse that ends up, and it kind of ends the story on a bummer. Like, I don't know where the love of my life went, and it'll never get better than this. And then you get this big, long, sad guitar outro, and then it's just me with my guitar. And it's actually kind of this beautiful thing that I never realized.
I'll tell you, if you wouldn't have had the intro to this song, I don't know if this would have worked. I think it works because it kind of bookends the song. It's a cap that really ties back to the intro.
Yeah, and it really is just like it's almost like a no regrets kind of thing, where it's like, and if everyone else heard this, they wouldn't be so sad. It was the best I ever had. So even if things took a turn for the worse, looking back, it made me who I am. And then, like you said, this podcast might as well be Chris DeMakes talks about Meat Loaf. But like the end of that, objects in the rearview mirror may appear closer than they are. It's a very long song title. It ends with basically that kind of thing. It's like, I never know where she disappeared. And then it's like piano. I can see her rising up out of the back seat now. And then it trails off and it ends on this kind of sad, somber thing. But I was like, I don't want it to be like sad, like, oh, I'm so bummed out now. Because, our fans ended up singing that part back to us super hard. So it's like, and if everyone else heard this, they wouldn't be so sad. And then I would turn the mic to the crowd. And even though it's a quiet part, they would scream the best I ever had to me. And we were always a band that was like, well, we don't have a hit. We don't have a popular song. All of our songs get an equal, for the most part, reaction. But then like a year after this record came out, we started realizing Best I Ever Had was like 90% more people would sing the words at us. And then we were like, okay, well, I think we should probably end with this song. And then by the end of our band's career, that became kind of like, I guess you could say, a minor hit for our band. Like,
yeah.
And even now today, the fact that it has a lot of plays on Spotify, it was put on a bunch of punk rock and pop punk playlists. And during our last tour, we would have people come up to us and be like, hey, glad I saw your last show. I brought my friend who doesn't know you. I dragged them along, but they actually did know you. And they would say like, oh, I worked at this shoe store and your song would play in the shoe store on our mix. Or, someone would be like, oh, I heard your song, blah, blah, blah. It always played here. So, it didn't get like radio airplay or anything, but, one day I'm on my way home from the grocery store and my phone started blowing up and it might've been in like 2012 or 2013. And people were just like, dude, the best I ever had's playing on Monday Night Football. And I was like, what are you talking about? And then, I, got home and even my wife was like, I've been getting texts that you're on Monday Night Football. And like,
awesome.
It was 10, 15 seconds. But yeah, the song kind of took on a life of its own.
Heck yeah.
Even more so after we broke up. And what makes me the happiest is that we really like the song. We like playing it. By the way, I took the capo off when we played it live. So back to E flat major, not
there you go.
Not F major. I had to save my voice. There's no way I could have lived like that.
That's why we picked it. It's it's got the most plays. It's become the Swellers' signature song. Your last record, The Light Under Closed Doors, came out in October 2013. That was your fifth and final album. And in June 2014, you announced that you'd be breaking up and booking farewell shows. So I'm going to ask you, I always end the episodes. First of all, thank you for sitting in. You've been a dear friend forever. Go check out Wonder Pedals. That's ONEDER. Is it wonder.com?
Yeah, wondereffects.com. And then like Instagram and TikTok are Wonder Effects. So yeah, okay. Spelled like Oneater, of course, because I have to make it difficult.
I would never ask anybody this, but you're my buddy. I've known you long enough. Any more plans for the Swellers in the future? Any shows, anything coming up, or we still on hiatus?
When the band broke up, I think a couple years after, we were kind of getting the itch. And then we all started having kids, started families.
Life took over.
Yes, got real jobs, for the first time ever. The pandemic hit. And now I think we're kind of all at the point where we're just like, oh, I can't even imagine learning the songs again. Like I don't even have time to play guitar, even though I'm in the music business making guitar pedals and making guitars. I have the Wonder Guitar Company, which is something I'm trying to get off the ground as well. And it's just one of those things where it's like, I don't want to say, I guess I'll say never, but it's like right now, I just cannot imagine doing that again. What I want to do is reunite the band and just hang out with them, because it's been a very, very long time since I've had all of them in one room.
So I guess it's too early to announce the May 2025 Punchline Swellers U.S. tour.
Oh man, see, that would be so cool. But it's like, I just already know. I'm going to have to like drive the kids to school too many times and it's not going to work. It's like,
it's going to be hard to drive the kids to school, go play a show and pick them up from school too. I could see that being difficult.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. We'll start doing like total matinee, like noontime shows. Cause that's also, I like to go to bed early.
So do I.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think I made music for the last time outside of the Swellers in I think 2017. And to be honest, I've been in like this weird lull where I haven't felt like being creative musically at all. And I haven't really written a song or recorded anything of my own in 7 or 8 years, that used to be part of my identity. And it was scary at first. I was like, what's wrong with me? And it's not writer's block. I just don't feel like putting anything out there. And then this year I got the spark again and I'm just too busy to act on it. So I've made time every night, even if it's 5 minutes, to record a little bit of demo stuff, even a chord progression. And I'm just going to get all this stuff saved. And I'm hoping I can make a record of my own in early 2025. I'm going to take a break from pedals, maybe even for like a week or 2 weeks, because I am so burnt out, but I love it. It's going very well and I'm having fun. But I just know around the holidays, I'm going to just need to hibernate for 2 or 3 weeks, And I think that would be a good time to actually play guitar for fun, be creative. So maybe if I get these random weird droney stoner sludge pop songs out of my head and onto a 7-inch, maybe then we could talk about the Swellers. I just need to get my feet wet, learn how to play guitar again, and go to plyrics.com and look up all of our words because I don't remember any of them, man.
Well, listen, Nick, I really appreciate you sitting in today and taking the time to talk to me. And I hope to see you sooner than later.
Absolutely, man. I've been a fan and friend for a long time, and I love the podcast. So it's an honor to be here. And it's honestly nice to dig up this old song, and it brought back some memories, because there's so many new memories coming into your brain as you become a grown up that the old ones kind of get filtered out. So it's nice to get that spark again and remember the old days.
How important are the words and what if already forgot? So many metaphors that can sink the fucking ship. I'll see you all at the bottom.
Hey, I hope you all enjoyed that conversation with Nick. I'm looking forward to talking to Chris about it in the rap segment that's coming right up after a few words from our sponsors.
Every listener to Too Much Effing Perspective knows that my co-host Alan Keller is a music nerd. And right up there in his pantheon with the Beatles and Elvis Costello is The Clash. So Alan, it's one thing for you to be a nerd, but how did you rope in a cool guy, 311's Nick Hexum, into a full-on Clash geek fest on our show?
Well, first of all, Alex, it was your idea.
Oh, right.
Second, Nick actually jammed with The Clash's Joe Strummer in a supergroup that included Flea and Tom Morello.
Okay, well, there is that.
And finally, one member of The Clash cited This Is Spinal Tap, the reason our show even exists, as his favorite movie.
Which one?
Hey, if you want to find out, you got to listen to Too Much Effing Perspective. That's Too Much EFFING Perspective. The only podcast you crank up to 11.
The Helping Friendly podcast explores the music and fan experience of Phish through interviews and deep dives on shows and tours. For more than 10 years, we've created insightful and fun discussions about our favorite band, and with the help of our guests and thematic series, we're still discovering new angles of appreciation for Phish. And when the band is on tour, we provide a review of every show the following day. As one of our listeners said, any Phish fans that enjoy meandering conversations and incredible insight on new and old Phish shows, this is for you. Highly recommend. It's not just about the band and the shows, it's about the journey getting there. Throughout 2024, we're going to be running down the top 25 Phish tours of all time, and that'll be interspersed with show reviews and regular episodes. Join us and check out the Helping Friendly podcast wherever you get your podcasts.
I don't think it overstates things to say that the Beatles were the greatest gift to entertainment and culture of our time, a secular religion, if you will, with their universal appeal and demonstrable impact on people's lives. I'm Robert Rodriguez, host of Something About the Beatles. With every episode, I speak with historians, musicians, artists, and Beatle witnesses, all in the service of fresh insights into the most joyous cultural entity the world has ever known. I hope you'll join me and listen to Something About the Beatles, now on Evergreen and wherever you get your podcasts.
One Hit Thunder is a podcast where we both celebrate and have a good laugh about bands and artists that had just one hit that we all know. Each week, we're joined by a guest from the world of music or comedy to learn more than you ever thought you would about some songs that you can't forget. And we decide if they brought the one-hit thunder or were nothing more than a one-hit blunder. Look, if you listen to the show, you're probably going to laugh, and I guarantee you're going to crush next time the bar has music trivia. Tag Team, Jane Child, Meredith Brooks, Looking Glass, Sean Mullins, Eiffel 65, EMF, Crash Test Dummies, Crazy Town, Chumbawamba. We have hundreds of episodes in our back catalog and a new episode each week, so pass the Dutchie, make sure you're connected, and subscribe to One Hit Thunder wherever you get your pods.
As we near the end of the show, here's a band you might not know.
Welcome to this week's Band You Might Not Know. If you'd like your band to be considered for Chris DeMakes a podcast, email your best song via MP3 only and a short bio to bandyoumightnotknow@gmail.com. This week's featured artist is Fighting Words, a punk rock band from Sacramento, California, made up of old friends who write fun songs about drinking and overly serious songs about the general awfulness of the world. The band is currently working on a full-length album. Here's a snippet of their song, Bury Me.
I can't make this cage more secure, and I hope you bury me deep in the cold hard ground. 'Cause if you were ever lost to me, I know I'll never be found. So we'll sleep in one bed tonight, 'cause I can't face you being killed if I survive.
The Wrap with Chris and Chris.
Chris, that was a great episode. I talked to Nick about this before we started recording. I can't believe that I've never crossed paths with him before. Both Fueled by Ramen alumni, different times, but just in general, I'm surprised we never played a show together, but I'm glad I finally got to meet him. I thought this was a great episode. One thing I really liked is there was a lot of talk about the emotion that the guitar can evoke in people when it's played the right way. You guys talked about the slide guitar, but it can for sure be another voice in the song.
Yeah, this was a surprising part of this song. You don't really hear too much slide guitar in pop punk. It's just not really a thing. And yeah, talk about evoking emotion. And I knew when he said, "Oh, we're going to get into some Skynyrd later," I knew this had to be what he was talking about, because it does sound like something Gary Rossington would have played.
Yeah, I also thought it was really cool to get a little bit more insight on Bill. And I want to record the Blasting Room at some point. That's like a punchline goal. So I love hearing these little stories. And we're not like we don't really play the punk beat too much, the fat wreck beat, but I thought it was pretty funny. I didn't know that Bill had an aversion to that, because I do think about a lot of fast punk songs being recorded at the Blasting Room. So I thought that was pretty funny, the part where he said, yeah, you can sneak in a little bit of that beat, like towards the end, after the radio DJs aren't paying attention or something. You could put it towards the end, because Rise Against does that once in a while.
Yeah, I mean, Bill is very opinionated, and Nick even said that they kind of broed down together on certain philosophies of how, backing vocals, those parts, and certainly the slide guitar part.
Yeah. He also touched on having a strong local all ages scene in your town, and a venue like that can be a real launching pad for a young band. Don't take that for granted if you have that, especially now, because I feel like there's a lot less of it now than there was. I think the mid 2000s were kind of like the biggest peak for that. If it grew, if it became a thing in the 80s and grew in the 90s, I kind of felt like those places where young people are throwing shows at VFWs and fire halls or wherever they can rent out to throw a show and build a scene. Either it's happening a lot less, or I just know about it a lot less. I know around me it happens a lot less than it used to. So if you have that, don't take it for granted, because that is very important for younger bands.
Yeah, and he had talked about there was a core, 3 or 4 bands in the Flint area, and without even realizing it back then, they were the scene. They were anchors of that particular scene, and that's, look back to where you cut your teeth. Same thing with Less Than Jake. You had to come from somewhere, and luckily I had a great scene in Gainesville, Florida to jump off of.
I like that Nick had a very early memory of you, Chris, because I have a lot of those too. He was only 18 years old and having that memory of, don't sign to a major label, kid. I feel like when you told that story, you had like a stogie in your mouth or something, yelling at some guy on the phone. But I think that's great. So many people, dude, on this show, people I know personally that I've had these conversations with, and people on this show who Less Than Jake has been their first big tour. You guys have helped launch the careers of so many bands. I think that's so cool. So many people, me and my friends, and so many people that come on this show hold you and your band in such high regard for that. And that is really cool, man.
Well, when are we getting the check from Fall Out Boy for taking them out on their first U.S. tour?
Yeah, that's right.
We didn't get a call for the stadium tour with Fall Out Boy and Weezer and Green Day last summer. Hello, Pete Wentz.
That's right. Hey, Chris, I also think that it's great that Nick still loves this song after all these years.
Yeah.
That's great. Once in a while, you hear the stories of the the artist who doesn't love their most popular song. I think that's great. And also, I think he said something important. If you want to be a songwriter, if you love music, make time, even if it's 5 minutes every day, to make a little music. I think that's great advice.
Got to work on your craft, man. And speaking of working on craft, our craft gets helped by you. And with those 5-star reviews over at Apple Podcasts, and I know, Chris, you have one ready to go for us.
I do. I got a 5-star review from RJSIS, or RJSIS or something, who said, absolute best music podcast, gave us 5 stars, and wrote, hands down, the best music-related podcast out there. Digs into the minutia of exactly how the song was conceived, modified, recorded, and produced. Obviously, the episodes dealing with songs you love are great, but it's also introduced me to a bunch of new music I hadn't heard before. Highly recommended. I love that review. That was a really good review.
Awesome. Was that from RJSIS?
RJSIS. It sounds like a disease.
Well, either that or a new arthritic medication.
Yeah. Or a death metal band, RJSIS.
This is RJSIS. Yes. That's right. Head over to Apple Podcasts if you don't mind leaving us that review, and check us out on all the socials. We are everywhere. I want to thank this week's guest, Nick Diener, for sitting in the hot seat, and we'll see you next week. Hey friends, have you been loving Chris DeMakes a Podcast? Well, spread the love by leaving a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Don't hesitate to share what you enjoy about the show in an actual written review on Apple Podcasts. Not only does it help more people discover us, but we often read reviews in the wrap segment of the show. It's a quick, cost-free way to support us and takes just a minute of your time. Your reviews mean the world to us and help us keep the podcast thriving. Thank you for being a listener, and thank you for being a friend.
This is the story of Whitney Houston.
This is the story of Kurt Cobain.
Of George Michael, of Otis Redding, of Amy Winehouse, of Michael Hutchence, Bob Marley. This is the story of Prince.
It's a new podcast series.
About how they died, why they died, and why we're still talking about them so long after.
It's like nothing you've ever heard before.
It's storytelling.
But it's more than that, because rock stars,
they tell us how we feel. They change our mood.
They change the clothes we wear, the people we hang out with,
the way we remember things.
It's them who give us those ludicrous moments, the ones where you're
jumping around, singing your heart out, feeling understood.
And it's those moments we'll help you remember, the ones you're thinking about right now.
That feeling.
That feeling.
It's coming soon from Crowd Network.
Just search for Death of a Rock Star on your podcast app.
And subscribe now.
What's up, everybody? I am Finn McKenty, host of the Punk Rock NBA podcast, part of the Sound Talent Media Podcast Network. My podcast is all about doing what you love for a living, and every week I sit down and talk to people who have done exactly that. For example, musicians like Tommy from Between the Buried and Me, Matt from Periphery, Lil Lotus and Shinigami, among many others, photographers, artists, designers, YouTubers like Glenn Fricker and Sarah Dici, and I unpack exactly how they got to where they are today with the goal of helping you do the same. So if that sounds cool, you can listen and subscribe at soundtalentmedia.com, and I'll see you there.